The storm howled outside, a beast clawing at the windows as Emily sat curled up by the fireplace in her grandmother's house. It was a Victorian mansion, perched on the edge of the woods, filled with dusty rooms, antique furniture, and secrets no one spoke of. Emily, 14 and fiercely curious, had been left in her grandmother Margaret's care for the weekend while her parents traveled. She had always felt drawn to the forbidden attic, where her grandmother warned her never to go. That night, the storm's fury made the house creak and groan. Unable to sleep, Emily lit a candle and tiptoed up the narrow staircase. The attic door was locked, but the old skeleton key on Margaret's nightstand fit perfectly. With a trembling hand, she pushed the door open. Inside, shadows danced on the walls. Old trunks, lace-draped furniture, portraits with cracked faces stared down at her. But at the center of it all, sitting on a child-sized chair, was the doll. It was about 2 feet tall, made of fine porcelain, but age had left its face cracked and pale. Its tangled black hair fell in messy waves around its shoulders, and its crimson dress was faded and tattered. Around its tiny neck hung a delicate silver locket. The doll's dark glass eyes reflected the flickering candlelight, making it seem almost alive. Emily felt an icy shiver run through her, but fascination outweighed fear. She picked up the doll, feeling its cold weight in her hands. She didn't notice the soft sigh of the wind behind her or the faint creak of the attic floorboards as she left with it. That night, Emily placed the doll on the shelf above her bed. She tucked herself under the heavy quilt, listening to the storm rage outside. But as the house fell silent, she heard it. A faint whispering, so soft it was barely audible. She sat up, heart pounding. The whispers seemed to come from the doll. Straining her ears, she couldn't make out the words, but the sound was unmistakable. She switched on the lamp. The whispers stopped. Laughing nervously, Emily lay back down. In the morning, she woke to find the doll no longer on the shelf. Instead, it sat on the windowsill, facing the garden. She was sure she hadn't moved it. At breakfast, Emily told her grandmother about the doll. Margaret's face turned ashen. "Where did you find that?" she demanded, her hands trembling. Emily explained about the attic. Margaret slumped into her chair, closing her eyes. "That doll is cursed," she whispered. "It belonged to my sister, Eliza." Margaret recounted the tale. Eliza had been a bright, cheerful girl, until the day she received the doll from a traveling merchant. Slowly she changed. She whispered to the doll at night, isolated herself, and grew pale and thin. One morning, they found Eliza dead, her face twisted in terror. The doll sat calmly on her chest. The family locked the doll in the attic, hoping to seal away its evil. That night, Emily dreamt of a pale girl standing at the foot of her bed. Her eyes were hollow, and her mouth moved silently. "Give her back." Emily woke with a start, heart racing. The doll was no longer on the shelf. It sat beside her pillow, its cracked face inches from hers, its glass eyes gleaming faintly in the moonlight. The next day, the whispers grew louder. The air grew colder. Emily's reflection in the mirror sometimes smiled when she didn't. Grandma Margaret's health began to fail. Her energy drained as if something unseen was feeding on her. Desperate, Emily tried to rid herself of the doll. She buried it deep in the garden, but by morning, it was back on the shelf, dirt clinging to its dress. She threw it into the fireplace, but the flames sputtered and went out. Emily turned to old books and internet forums, searching for a way to break the curse. She discovered a binding ritual, one that required the locket around the doll's neck. That night, Emily prepared a circle of salt, lit candles, and opened the silver locket, revealing a small lock of blonde hair, Eliza's. As she chanted the incantation, the doll's glass eyes glowed red, and the room trembled. The whispers rose to screams. Shadows twisted and danced on the walls. The doll's arms jerked unnaturally, and its cracked face split wider, as if trying to speak. Suddenly, the candles blew out. In the dark, Emily felt cold fingers wrap around her wrist. She screamed, struggling to relight the candles as the doll's thin, high-pitched voice filled her mind. "You are mine." But Emily persisted, finishing the chant with trembling determination. With a blinding flash, the house fell silent. When she opened her eyes, The doll lay lifeless, its eyes dull, its body cracked and still. Emily took the doll far into the woods, digging a deep hole under an ancient oak tree. She buried the doll, covering it with earth and heavy stones. As she walked away, she felt the weight lift. The house no longer whispered. The mirrors no longer reflected twisted smiles. Grandma Margaret recovered, though she never spoke of Eliza again. But sometimes, at night, Emily dreamed of the doll, its pale, cracked face and dark eyes watching her from the shadows, waiting. Weeks passed. Emily tried to settle back into her life, but the memories clung to her. She dreamt less frequently of the doll, but sometimes she would still wake at night, convinced she heard faint scratching on the window or soft whispers outside her door. Then, one afternoon, Emily's best friend Sophie visited. As they walked through the woods near the burial site, Sophie stopped suddenly. "What's that?" she asked, pointing to something poking through the ground. Emily's heart froze. Half buried under the roots of the old oak tree was a pale porcelain hand. Emily panicked. She tried to brush it off, telling Sophie it was just a broken toy. But Sophie insisted on digging it out. As they pulled, the doll emerged, its black hair tangled with roots, its cracked face smeared with dirt, but its glass eyes were clear and gleaming. That night, the whispers returned, louder than before. Emily's room grew unbearably cold, and when she looked into the mirror, she saw not herself, but Eliza, pale, weeping, whispering, "You promised." Sophie called, frightened. The doll had appeared at her house, sitting on her windowsill. Emily and Sophie dove into Old Town records and Margaret's journals. They discovered that the traveling merchant who sold Eliza the doll was rumored to be a practitioner of dark magic. The doll was crafted not as a toy, but as a vessel, a prison for a vengeful spirit. Emily realized burying it hadn't broken the curse. It had only delayed it. Emily confronted her grandmother, demanding the full truth. Margaret, frail and exhausted, finally confessed. She had known the doll was cursed, but kept it because part of her still longed for Eliza. She begged Emily to help her finish what should have been done decades ago, destroy the doll completely. They prepared the true ritual, one that required confronting the spirit inside the doll directly. Emily and Sophie gathered what they needed: candles, salt, iron, and the bloodline connection, Margaret. That night, they drew the circle, placed the doll at its center, and began the chant. As the room darkened, the air turned icy. The doll's eyes flared red, and a cold wind rushed through the house, slamming doors and rattling windows. The spirit of Eliza materialized, pale and sorrowful. Margaret, trembling, reached out, begging her sister's forgiveness. But the spirit's face twisted, mouth stretching unnaturally wide, voice shrieking, "You left me!" Shadows lashed out, knocking Sophie back, sending Emily to the ground. Margaret, sobbing, stepped into the circle. With her last strength, she clasped the doll, whispering an old family prayer. The doll cracked, fractures spreading across its porcelain skin, until it shattered with a deafening crack. In the silence that followed, Emily and Sophie slowly sat up. Margaret lay still, her face peaceful. The shattered remains of the doll were cold and lifeless. They buried Margaret next to Eliza in the family plot. Emily kept one fragment of the doll, a tiny piece of the locket, as a reminder of what they had survived. But some nights, when the wind howls through the trees, Emily swears she can still hear faint whispers in the dark, calling her name.